The enemy assault erupted without warning, trapping an entire SEAL team on their own training range. Gunfire tore through the air, mortars rained down, and the men who were supposed to be the most prepared found themselves cornered. And then out of the chaos, a quiet voice spoke. "Give me your rifle," said the girl everyone thought was just there to clean. The wounded SEAL commander blinked in disbelief. "You can't be serious." Her eyes were calm, steady. "Trust me." What happened next would stun everyone, rewriting the very idea of who belonged on the battlefield. Meet Victoria Chen. But before we dive into her unbelievable story, make sure to subscribe to our channel. More untold stories like this one are waiting for you, and you won't want to miss them. Victoria Chen was 26 years old. To the SEALs at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, she was invisible, just the quiet maintenance worker who swept brass-patched target boards and stocked ammunition. They barely noticed her presence. But what none of them knew was that Victoria carried the bloodline of a legend. Her grandfather, Master Sergeant David L. Phantasma Chen, had been one of the most feared and respected Green Beret snipers in Vietnam. With 134 confirmed kills, his name was whispered about in military circles for decades. Growing up on his ranch in rural Montana, Victoria had been his shadow. Every weekend while other children played, she learned the secrets of long-range shooting, breath control, wind reading, ballistic calculations, and most importantly, the patience to remain unseen until the perfect shot presented itself. Little Bird, her grandfather, used to tell her, "A true sniper doesn't just shoot straight. A true sniper thinks like the enemy, disappears into the earth, and strikes when no one expects it. The rifle is only a tool. Your mind, that's the real weapon." His injury in Cambodia forced him into retirement, but his knowledge never faded. He poured every ounce of it into Victoria. Her skills grew far beyond what standard sniper schools taught. She could read the air sense shifts in pressure and calculate bullet trajectories through obstacles most professionals would never attempt. By her teenage years, she was defeating seasoned hunters and competitive marksmen. Sometimes she entered tournaments under assumed names, walking away with trophies that baffled rivals twice her age. Yet when she tried to follow the path officially enlisting, applying testing doors slammed shut. Her scores were perfect, her evaluations record-breaking. But time after time, institutional bias kept her on the sidelines. They told her she should pick more appropriate roles, ignoring the fact that her abilities outshone men already serving as snipers. Frustrated but not broken, she chose to stay close to the world she belonged in. That's why she took a humble job at Coronado. To the SEALs, she was just the cleaning girl. To herself, she was a warrior in waiting, watching, learning, and sharpening her edge in silence. Commander Ryan Steele Patterson was everything Victoria was not: celebrated, decorated, and respected across the Navy SEAL community. At 38, he had built his reputation through 16 years of combat in the world's harshest environments. His men followed him with absolute loyalty, knowing his decisions often meant the difference between life and death. But Patterson was also a product of his time. Special operations had long been a male-dominated sphere. Women were seen as support staff, never combatants. For him, Victoria was efficient and reliable, but still invisible, just someone who replaced targets and kept the range tidy. He never once thought to ask about her past, her skills, or her potential. This blind spot wasn't malice. It was the military's culture built over decades of tradition, a culture that failed to see beyond its own assumptions. For 2 years, Victoria watched from the sidelines. She studied every drill, every tactic, every maneuver the SEALs rehearsed. Quietly, she noticed gaps and weaknesses in methods that her grandfather's unconventional wisdom could have corrected. She practiced on her own, far from watchful eyes, at civilian ranges across Southern California. While the SEALs sharpened their edge for battle, she honed hers in silence. Then came the day that would tear through routine and expose the truth. It began as an ordinary morning at Coronado, a training cycle designed to prepare the team for deployment to the Middle East. The men were running close-quarters battle drills, refining their precision shooting skills, when at 08:47 hours, the world exploded. Mortar rounds slammed into the base, shattering the calm. Smoke and fire erupted as enemy forces stormed the perimeter with ruthless coordination. Patterson's radio crackled with the chilling words, "This is not a drill." Multiple hostiles inside the wire. The attack was perfectly timed during a shift change when security was at its weakest. Dozens of infiltrators had studied the base, exploiting blind spots and striking at the heart of America's most elite training ground. Caught in the open, Patterson's men scrambled for cover. Wounded SEALs bled out behind shattered concrete barriers. Ammunition ran low. Enemy snipers tightened their grip from high ground, picking off anything that moved. Reinforcements were still 15 minutes away. For the trapped team, 15 minutes felt like eternity. And in that chaos, while others froze or ducked, one figure moved with uncanny calm. The cleaning girl, Victoria Chen, low-crawled across the battlefield not toward safety, but toward opportunity. The moment that had been building her entire life had finally arrived. Gunfire snapped across the range. Patterson's men were trapped, pinned by snipers and machine guns, positioned with surgical precision. 2 SEALs were already wounded. Williams, their designated marksman, bleeding heavily from a shoulder wound, and Thompson, the communications specialist, unable to move with shrapnel, lodged in his legs. The rest of the team fought desperately to hold their ground. But the truth was brutal, they were losing. That's when Patterson noticed her. Through the haze of smoke and the sting of concrete dust, he saw Victoria moving not like a terrified civilian, but like someone who belonged in the chaos. She kept low, her movements deliberate, her body flowing, with the same instincts he saw in seasoned operators. While others ran for cover, she ran toward the equipment shed. Moments later, she emerged cradling a Mark 11 sniper rifle, the very weapon Williams had dropped when he went down. Patterson's instinct screamed at him to stop her. She was just maintenance staff. She wasn't trained. She wasn't supposed to be here. But before he could speak, Victoria's eyes locked with his. Calm. Focused. Calculating. "Commander," she said firmly, "I can take out their snipers, but I need your spotting scope and your radio frequency." Patterson hesitated. It sounded insane. A cleaning girl claiming she could change the tide of battle. But there was no fear in her voice, only certainty. "Your sniper is down. Your men are trapped. Backup won't be here in time," she pressed on. "You can let me try, or you can watch them die." For the first time, Patterson felt the weight of a truth he hadn't seen before. This woman wasn't ordinary. She wasn't panicking. She had a plan when no one else did. He made the hardest choice of his command career. Williams Patterson called out to his wounded marksman, "Give her your scope and headset." "Sir, she's not qualified," Williams protested, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "I don't care about qualified," Patterson barked back. "I care if she can shoot." Victoria slid the headset on with steady hands. No shaking, no hesitation. Before Patterson could second-guess himself, she was already climbing the observation tower, moving under fire with fluidity that stunned everyone who watched. From that moment on, the woman they thought they knew disappeared. She wasn't the cleaning girl anymore. She was something else entirely. The observation tower loomed above the range, exposed to enemy fire. Yet Victoria climbed with a composure that belonged to seasoned warriors, not maintenance staff. From below, Patterson watched, torn between fear for her safety and awe at the precision of her every move. When she reached the top, there was no hesitation. Victoria set up the Mark 11 rifle with methodical care, adjusting the bipod, aligning her scope, making micro-corrections with the ease of long habit. Every motion spoke of years of training. Patterson keyed the radio. "Overwatch, this is ground. First target, enemy sniper, at 2 o'clock, 600 meters. He's keeping us pinned." Her voice came back steady and professional. "Ground overwatch. I have visual. Calculating wind drift and elevation. Stand by." 30 seconds later, the shot cracked. 600 meters away, the enemy sniper crumpled instantly, his rifle clattering down the rocks. Silence rippled through Patterson's men. Petty Officer Davis whispered what they were all thinking. She actually made that shot, but Victoria wasn't done. Without pause, she shifted to her second target, a sniper hidden on the opposite ridge. 45 seconds later, another shot rang out. Another hostile down. "Overwatch to ground," she reported coolly. 2 targets neutralized, identifying additional threats. Patterson's hands trembled on the radio, not from fear, but from the realization that this woman, invisible for 2 years, was systematically dismantling an enemy assault that had his elite team cornered. Her third shot took out a machine gunner suppressing the base's main entrance, a target nearly obscured behind concrete. At 750 meters, with shifting winds, the shot was one most trained snipers would hesitate to take. Victoria fired once, and the gunner collapsed. Her fourth and fifth shots followed in quick succession, eliminating two spotters directing mortar fire. Predicting their movement across broken terrain, she fired with deadly accuracy. By the time her sixth shot echoed across the range, the coordinated attack was unraveling. Enemy forces faltered their carefully planned assault, collapsing under fire. They hadn't accounted for a sniper they didn't know existed. Ground Overwatch Victoria reported calmly. 6 confirmed. Remaining hostiles are retreating northeast. Recommend pursuit if assets available. From his position below, Patterson stared up at the tower. The woman who had replaced their targets for 2 years had just saved them all. When Victoria finally descended, the SEALs men who had barely spoken to her before looked at her with respect, confusion, and disbelief written across their faces. Commander Patterson stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. "Chen, what just happened?" Victoria handed back the rifle, her eyes calm. "I did what needed to be done, sir." But Patterson knew better. She hadn't just acted. She had performed with a level of precision most military snipers only dreamed of, and he had to know why. The battlefield had gone quiet. Smoke lingered, debris smoldered, and the distant thud of retreating footsteps marked the enemy's withdrawal. The SEALs gathered, battered but alive, staring at the woman they thought they knew for the first time. Commander Patterson stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "Chen," he said, his voice low but edged with urgency. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Victoria removed the headset and placed the Mark 11 gently on the ground. For a long moment she said nothing. The silence stretched, every SEAL waiting. Finally she answered. "My grandfather, Master Sergeant David Chen, Army Special Forces, Vietnam." The name hung in the air. For men raised on military lore, it was like hearing a ghost had stepped into their midst. El Fantasma, the Phantom, a sniper whose 134 confirmed kills were the stuff of legend. Patterson felt a chill. "He taught me everything," Victoria continued. "Everything the Army wouldn't. Everything they thought I couldn't do because of who I am." Her words cut deeper than bullets. For 2 years she had walked unnoticed among them, her extraordinary skill hidden behind the label of maintenance staff. Not because she lacked talent, but because the system refused to see it. "Why didn't you tell us?" Patterson asked finally. Her answer was simple and devastating. "When would I have told you, sir? None of you ever asked. To you, I was just the cleaning girl." The SEALs shifted uncomfortably. Men who prided themselves on sharp eyes and tactical awareness suddenly realized they had overlooked someone extraordinary simply because she didn't fit their expectations. 15 minutes later, the quick reaction force arrived, only to find the battle already over. Enemy bodies lay scattered, their assault broken. And standing among the survivors was a woman who had just rewritten everything the Navy thought it knew about snipers. The after-action reports were classified, studied in command centers and war colleges. Patterson's own recommendation was immediate and uncompromising. Victoria Chen should be commissioned as a naval officer and given the place she deserved. For once, the system listened. In the weeks that followed, the Coronado incident became the subject of hushed conversations across the military. Senior officers dissected every detail of Victoria's performance, her precision under fire, her tactical instincts, her composure when elite operators were on the verge of collapse. What astonished them most was not simply that she had saved a SEAL team. It was how she had done it with a mastery that rivaled, even surpassed, graduates of the most elite sniper schools in the world. Commander Patterson pushed harder than anyone. His report did not just praise her, it demanded change. He made it clear Victoria Chen didn't just save my team. She exposed the flaws in our system. We are blind to talent when it doesn't look the way we expect. 6 months later, his words bore fruit. Victoria was offered a direct commission as a Navy officer, not through the usual grinding years of bureaucracy, but fast-tracked because her ability could no longer be ignored. She entered programs once closed to her, and at each step she didn't just meet the standard, she raised it. Her reputation grew, first whispered in hallways, then spoken aloud, the overlooked warrior who had outshot trained snipers and forced the Navy to open its eyes. And soon she was no longer just part of the system. She was shaping it. Lieutenant Commander Victoria "Ghost" Chen took charge of advanced marksmanship training, teaching not just the technical skills of a sniper, but the mindset her grandfather had instilled. Her lessons echoed the words he once spoke on a Montana ranch. The rifle is only a tool. Your mind is the weapon. Both men and women trained under her guidance, learning that excellence wasn't bound by expectation, gender, or tradition. Her presence challenged old assumptions, and slowly the institution began to adapt. For Patterson, she became more than the woman who had saved his team. She was a constant reminder that leadership meant looking deeper, listening harder, and never underestimating the quiet figures standing at the edges. For years, she was invisible. Now she stood at the center, indispensable. Years later, Victoria Chen's name carried weight in circles that once overlooked her. She was no longer the girl sweeping brass in the shadows. She was the officer shaping how the Navy thought about talent, about potential, about what it truly meant to be a warrior. Her story became a quiet legend within the ranks. Commanders repeated it to remind their teams that the most dangerous assumption a soldier can make is thinking they already know everything about the people around them. For Victoria, the transformation was never about glory. It was about purpose. She taught that strength is often hidden behind humility, that the extraordinary can be disguised in the ordinary. She embodied the truth her grandfather had drilled into her. A sniper is not defined by the rifle, but by the mind and the will behind it. And perhaps that is why her story resonates far beyond the battlefield. Because who among us hasn't been underestimated, who hasn't felt invisible, dismissed or defined by labels that never told the whole story? Victoria's journey is a reminder to never assume, to never overlook, and to never forget that greatness often hides in plain sight. Sometimes the most elite warriors aren't the ones charging forward in glory. They're the ones waiting patiently, quietly until the moment comes when they can no longer be ignored. Victoria Chen didn't just clean the ranges. She was forged by them, and when her moment arrived, she proved that invisible strength can become the difference between defeat and survival. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, make sure to subscribe, because somewhere right now, someone extraordinary is waiting to be seen. The silence after battle is often heavier than the fight itself. At Coronado, the smoke cleared, the wounded were treated, and the fallen were counted. But for Victoria Chen, the aftermath was only the beginning. Word of what had happened spread quickly through the base. Officers who had barely noticed her now wanted every detail. How had a civilian range worker eliminated an entire sniper element? How had she predicted wind drift and firing angles more accurately than trained SEAL marksmen? Victoria, who had lived in shadows, suddenly found herself in interrogation rooms, conference halls and offices filled with men in uniform who studied her like a puzzle. Questions came rapid fire, sharper than bullets. Where did you train? Who authorized you to fire? How long have you been preparing for this? She answered with quiet honesty. My grandfather trained me. I fired because your men were dying, and I have been preparing my whole life. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. None of them wanted to admit that the Navy had overlooked someone like her for so long. None of them wanted to face that the system itself had nearly cost an entire SEAL team their lives. Meanwhile, Commander Patterson stood firmly by her side. In every meeting, he repeated the same words, "Gentlemen, this woman didn't break our system. She exposed it. She showed us what we've been blind to." Not everyone agreed. Some saw her as a liability, a civilian who had acted without clearance. Others saw her as a threat to tradition. But there were also those who recognized the truth. If she had not climbed that tower, the report they were writing would be about dead SEALs, not retreating enemies. The classified after-action report became legendary within special operations circles. Training schools studied her engagement shot by shot. Analysts described her as a ghost who rewrote the rules of the battlefield. For Victoria, the sudden spotlight was overwhelming. She had spent years invisible, and now every eye followed her. Yet she stayed the same calm, precise, and unwilling to let pride replace purpose. When the formal recommendation arrived, her direct commission into the Navy, Victoria accepted not for recognition, but because she knew there were others like her, hidden and underestimated, waiting for someone to prove that invisibility did not mean insignificance. That day, the cleaning girl was gone. In her place stood an officer in the making, one whose name would echo far beyond the base she once swept. Years passed, and Victoria Chen's name became a fixture in the halls of military training schools. Cadets whispered about her story during late-night drills. Instructors referenced her precision in sniper courses, and young recruits, especially those once told they didn't belong, found hope in her example. Lieutenant Commander Victoria Ghost Chen no longer blended into the background. She stood at the head of classrooms training both men and women in the art of patience, focus, and invisibility. Her lessons weren't only about angles and wind calls, they were about resilience, about carrying on when doors slammed shut, about refusing to let others define what you are capable of. Sometimes after classes, trainees would gather around asking the same question. "Ma'am, how did you stay strong when nobody believed in you?" Victoria always gave the same answer, echoing her grandfather's words. "The rifle is just steel. The real weapon is your mind. If you know who you are and what you can do, the world's doubts don't matter." But her influence reached further than the Navy. Civilian shooting clubs, universities, and even leadership seminars began telling her story. A high school girl in Texas wrote that she had almost quit her dream of becoming a pilot until she read about Victoria. A young man in Ohio who struggled with dyslexia said her story inspired him to keep pushing when teachers underestimated him. Victoria had become more than a sniper. She had become a symbol for anyone overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated. And Patterson, the commander, who once saw her as nothing more than a support staff, often repeated a line whenever he spoke to new officers. "Never assume you know everything about the people beside you. The strongest among us are often the ones we fail to see." Victoria Chen's journey was proof that greatness doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits silently until the moment comes when invisibility can no longer hold it back. Her legacy went beyond medals and ranks. She proved that true strength doesn't ask for permission, it acts when it matters most. Long after she set down her rifle, her story endured. The woman once unseen, who saved a team against all odds.